Ladies and gentlemen, this is TVP World. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee, and welcome aboard the Eastern Express. On this episode, we're diving into an often overlooked corner of Eastern Europe. So overlooked, it's like the appendix of the map. You know it's there, but you're not quite sure what it does. I'm talking about Transnistria, a breakaway region in Moldova that's been stuck in a decade-long crisis. Think of it like an old Tupperware of questionable leftovers in your back of the fridge. Not sure what it's inside, and it might be dangerous, but you can't just throw it out without risking an odd smell. Now, buckle up because our train is leaving the station and Transnistria is the next stop. Here's a look at our latest report.
The situation around Transnistria is boiling, while its people barely have enough to heat their own homes. The breakaway region's Soviet-era power grid is not expected to keep up with the immense demand for power. Authorities are warning that in weeks, the situation could become untenable. Moscow, however, seems to be very busy pointing fingers at its favorite targets, NATO and countries smaller than itself.
Some hotheads in Chisinau, perhaps inspired by NATO functionaries, have begun to fantasize about how to use the energy crisis in the country to resolve the Transnistrian issue by force.
The crisis started when Russia halted gas deliveries to Moldova on January 1st over allegedly unpaid debts. Debts which an international audit had not been able to verify, according to Moldovan officials. To make matters worse, Chisinau also says that water supply in Transnistria is being disrupted. Moldova believes that the aim behind these actions is fairly straightforward.
The meaning of all of this is for Russia to create instability in the region, but also very importantly to influence the results of the parliamentary elections in Moldova.
Russia had been the main source of well-priced energy for Transnistria. The breakaway region itself is pro-Russian, but it is isolated, sandwiched between Moldova and Ukraine. Experts currently are uncertain whether the crisis will push Transnistria's inhabitants to integrate more with Moldova. Opinions among residents differ, but many of them are not sure whether the authorities know how to solve this problem.
And now, let's take a look at the issue in greater detail. Now, for those of you who didn't know, Moldova had any breakaway territories, surprise! Turns out that, while most people can barely spot Moldova on the map, it's got an entire region that's separated as the Soviet Union collapsed. Transnistria, often described as a frozen conflict, is perched along the eastern bank of the Dniester River. It's recognized by no UN member state, which ironically makes its legitimacy about as widely accepted as an expired coupon at a supermarket. But within its own territory, Transnistria has a government, a currency, an army, and just about every symbol of statehood except for the recognition of most of the planet. So, why does Transnistria even exist as a breakaway region? Well, let me offer a quick history lesson, but stop groaning, it'll be fast, promise. So when Moldova gained independence from the Soviet Union, pro-Russian communities on the eastern bank of the Dniester wanted to remain close to Moscow. Their love for Mother Russia was so intense you'd think they were fans camping out for the latest iPhone release. Now this led to tensions that escalated into an armed conflict in 1992. After a brief but violent confrontation, a ceasefire left Transnistria de facto independent, but de jure it's still internationally recognized as part of Moldova. If that reminds you of any awkward divorces you've seen, you're not alone. On paper, Transnistria is a hot pot of different ethnic groups, Moldovans, Russians, Ukrainians, like a big Slavic dinner party. Now, in reality, it leans heavily towards Russian influence, which is partly why there's a contingent of around 1,500 Russian troops stationed there, ostensibly to keep the peace. Now, why should anyone care about this little region that's smaller than some American counties? Because Transnistria isn't just a quirk of post-Soviet geography. It's also a geopolitical pressure cooker. As tensions between Russia and the West continues to simmer, Transnistria's status could ignite bigger flames. With Ukraine right next door, any escalation in Transnistria could yank the entire region into a conflict that's less frozen and more boiling over. And that is not the Eastern European culinary experience that we're hoping for. So, what's the path forward? Well, many hope that economic incentives or closer ties with the EU might gently nudge Moldova and Transnistria towards a peaceful resolution. And if you happen to pass by one of those leftover Soviet enclaves, well, do wave hello. They've been waiting for someone to notice. And now here to shed more light on the issue is Eusebiu Slavitescu, former Romanian diplomat. Hello, sir, and welcome to Eastern Express.
Thank you for having me.
So the situation in Transnistria is quite complicated, and I'm hoping to kind of iron some things out. And starting with what I find more perplexing is, well, when at the start of the year, Ukraine stopped using its pipeline to transport Russian gas, we see a lot of alarm bells being signaled, and Fico, for example, Slovakian Prime Minister, went to Russia to discuss transit of Russian gas, where he got a lot of criticism for having discussing with Vladimir Putin, because, well, if it's Ukraine that is stopping the transport of these gas, then he should be talking to Ukraine, not Russia. But then we're looking at the Transnistria situation, and now Moldova is saying that, well, Russia is responsible for the halt of the gas, even though it is Ukraine that kind of stopped the pipeline. Can you help us understand where the disconnect is?
Well, the disconnect is, it was Kiev's decision to cut off the pipeline.
Right.
But the decision to exploit this decision belongs to Russia. Because Russia never loses an opportunity to create chaos and destabilization. And it's exactly what is happening. By putting all the blame on Chisinau, where Chisinau has no blame. And again, it was cut off on the 1st of January, right?
Right.
But Kiev announced it 2 years ago, in 2023, that this is going to be the case. So it's not like this came out of nowhere. They knew it is going to happen, and they've done nothing. If Moldova, before the full-scale war, Russian illegal, brutal, and criminal invasion on peaceful and sovereign Ukraine, I emphasize the words because language matters. If Moldova was 100% dependent on Russia, right now Moldova is 100% independent on Russia. So it can happen. There are ways, there are alternatives.
Right, and like you mentioned, they seem to not have done anything about it. In fact, I was reading some report today that says that when given opportunity for alternatives to Russian energy, the breakaway region of Transnistria actually denied such opportunities. So what led to that decision?
Oh, it's very easy. As I said, chaos. This is Russia's playbook, has been all along. Although some of our Western friends never really took it seriously. Why? Why exploit this crisis when you have 500,000 residents right now with limited heating, with no schools, with no kindergartens, with jobs that are just stopped, because the entire local economy is based, right, on free gas from Russia. Just like Germany industry was for a few years, not for free, but a better price.
Very cheap, yeah.
Right? Except Moldova and Transnistria is not Germany. They are poor.
So were there any opportunity beforehand that they could realistically switch off Russian gas without a significant impact to their economy? Like you mentioned, it's not a very wealthy country, so perhaps the impact is too strong for them?
They didn't even try it to diversify, right? Because they are waste. Even right now, within this full-scale crisis, Chisinau has offered help, multiple ways, multiple solutions, and Tiraspol says no. And when I say the sole local government in Tiraspol, I mean Kremlin's. Let's be clear about this. This is Kremlin's hand, Kremlin's textbook. But why do they do it? Why do put 500,000 of people in such a pain? Because it is a pain, right? There are multiple reasons. First, the narrative of blaming Chisinau, where a pro-EU government is now in power for another couple of months, until this summer, end of summer, when we will have parliamentary elections. So the whole narrative, or putting the blame on Chisinau, Russia hopes to gain some voters. Because the margins between the pro-EU and the pro-Russian forces, they are very slim. Maya Sandu won only with the diaspora's vote. Otherwise, locally, she would have lost. So that's the thin line. A second reason why Russia is enjoying this, and they are, is the electricity costs in Moldova. So up until now, around 60%, I think, if I'm not mistaken, of the electricity was coming from Transnistria, from the Chuchurgana I don't remember the name anyway, was coming that was fueled by Russian free gas, except they were buying it at a better price. Now, since Moldova does not have this option anymore, it has to get the gas or the electricity from neighboring Romania or some other countries. And thanks God, Romania, as of October, it's the biggest EU gas exporter. And that creates so much. So we have the capacity. Romania stands ready, and our energy minister already announced it a couple of times. We are ready, and we are providing right now around 65–70% of the energy, depending on the needs of Moldova. Except the price they pay for our electricity, it's not the same price they would pay from Transnistria, because that was free gas.
Right.
There is no such free for us. So this will come up in the pockets of everyday Moldovans. Electricity will go higher cost. It has done so in the past and will continue to do so. And also, one more comment. Before, in the run-up of the EU referendum, I remember there was a politician, and I won't say his name, a pro-Russian politician, who promised free electricity, free gas for the entire Moldovan if the referendum fails. So you see, connecting the dots.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's very politically expedient if they can promise cheap energy, free energy, especially when we're talking about a country that is not that wealthy. So perhaps it is in the Kremlin's best interest to make sure that the gas price become front and center of the issue. And therefore, well, going back to Moldova, though, you just mentioned that Moldova has been completely independent from Russian energy, but then having to import energy from Transnistria, which does rely mostly on cheap or free Russian gas, isn't that a roundabout way to still being dependent on it?
Not when you have diversified so much that from today until tomorrow you can switch with neighboring Romania.
Okay.
So in that case, why not having a better price? Because Russia still has a huge interest of controlling Moldova. We know that. We know why they have done in the presidential elections, with all the Russian standard massive interference, that will continue to do so up until the next elections. Because Moldova, the stakes for Russia and Moldova, they are huge. I mean, just imagine Russia could open another front from Moldova to Ukraine, right? Launching missiles from Moldova. And that would be more precise, because it's very close. So the stakes are really high. That's the reason why they're not giving up, and they will not give up.
Right, and going back to the Transnistria situation, why are they so eager and so willing to cooperate with this energy coercion? Isn't that a threat to themselves as well if they are so reliant on Russian energy, which they know could be switched off at the kind of, tip of the thumb?
They could, although they are not doing it, although their people are suffering, and although Chisinau handed them the palm, let's fix it, they just don't want it. Basically controlled by Kremlin. I mean, I don't even refer to them as a local government, so-called government. I refer to them as Kremlins. But unfortunately, 500,000 people are suffering because of their choices.
Right, and what happened there? Like, how did it came to be that they are so controlled by the Kremlin?
Well, the whole breakaway thing that came out in '92, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, and with Russia's armies intervening and, with those conflicts, it was all Russia's idea of keeping a hand in the region so you can weaponize it whenever you need it. And right now, that's what they're doing. Right. They are weaponizing, which Russia has done with gas and resources. In the past 20 years, it has done so with Germany, with the entire European Union. It has done so with absolutely even friends they have. That's how good of a friend Russia is.
Right. Is there any alternatives for Moldova to not have to rely on Transnistria for most of its energy? And as we see right now, perhaps being dependent on it kind of indirectly make them a victim of, like you said, the Russian manipulation and all of their energy crisis?
Well, Moldova can afford to be independent. That's the thing. With when I say can afford, Moldova has a lot of friends, very good friends. Whether we talk about the United States of America, either we talk about the European Union, neighboring Romania, who has a lot of capacity and it's right across the border. So it's a sort of a different story for them, right? Yeah. We kept on saying, it's pretty famous, winter is coming. And winter, well, it has arrived in Transnistria.
Also, talking about the political situation, you mentioned it is quite pivotal, the election that's coming up.
Yeah.
And as we see this, a lot of election cycle recently, that energy prices is kind of on the top of the ballot for a lot of different countries. So where do you see this going? Do you think that the manipulation weaponizing energy will give Kremlin a favorable result when it comes to the upcoming election?
Well, they are certainly hoping for it, and chances are they can make it. Again, the margins are so small, their resources for meddling in elections are enormous because the stakes are so high for them. So that's pretty much it. I mean, to my eyes, these are the stakes.
Right, and what are some of the things perhaps Western countries can do to, well, if we already know this is going to happen, at least alleviate the situation enough so that the Kremlin's thumb won't tip the scale to the other side?
So I was reading today about the proposal Chisinau made to Transnistria for gas, and they refused it, saying it's not free. So one of the solutions would be give them free, but that's just not how things are working in this region.
All right, so yeah, it's very tricky with the authorities within Transnistria kind of very heavily favoring one side over the other.
At some point, how this is going to end, nobody really knows, but let's look at the facts. What choices do they have? So Transnistria either takes Moldova's hands and the European Union's help, because the EU already stated that they are ready to help, but not give for free. Right? I mean, you can do the preferential price, which Romania already does with Moldova, and it's happening. Even President Zelensky announced that during the night they can transfer some of the electricity if need be, if they have a surplus. So these are the facts. So either they take Moldova's proposal, either they will open up the pipeline, the Balkan pipeline that goes through Bulgaria and Romania. I don't see any other choice, except for that also it cannot be free gas.
No. Very, very tricky situation there.
Very.
Thank you so much for breaking all of this down. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having
being with
me.
us. Cheers. And now we're moving on to the Eastern News Flash, a series of all the other stories from the East that you don't want to miss. The U.S. has pledged a $500 million military aid package for Ukraine. This move is viewed as part of the Biden administration's efforts to send as much support as possible to Ukraine before Donald Trump's upcoming inauguration.
The new set of military aid for Kyiv was announced by U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin. The package will include missiles for Ukraine's air defense, ammunition, air-to-ground munitions, and further equipment to support the F-16s currently in the hands of Ukrainian pilots. The aid package was discussed at the Ramstein Air Base in Germany during a meeting of the Ukraine Defense Contact Group. The format was brought together by the United States to coordinate arms supplies for Ukraine in the wake of the Russian invasion. President Volodymyr Zelensky has also called on Europe to coalesce around Kyiv should U.S. support for his country wane following the change of power in Washington. The Ramstein meeting comes just a day after Ukraine suffered its highest number of losses in lives in weeks in a Russian attack on Zaporizhia, which killed 13.
According to The Guardian, citing data from energy analysts, Europe imported record amounts of Russian liquefied natural gas in 2024. Despite significantly reducing its reliance on piped gas from Russia, the continent remains far from achieving energy independence from Moscow.
In the previous year, European ports received close to 18 million tons of liquefied natural gas from Russia, says data from Rystad Energy. This is some 2 million tons more than in 2023. Some of the imports were later resold to other countries. Energy experts point out that Russian LNG is offered at a discount compared to other suppliers. No sanctions have also been imposed on the resource, adding to the reasons why a raise in imports has been observed. This information comes just days after Ukraine ended its decades-long gas transit deal with Moscow. While the European Union has banned Russian crude and coal after Russia invaded Ukraine, it has refrained from imposing similar bans on pipeline gas and LNG. The EU did say in June 2024, however, that it would ban the transshipment of Russian LNG to non-EU countries.
Finland has announced plans to keep its border with Russia closed. The government in Helsinki also aims to extend a controversial law permitting border guards to turn away asylum seekers under specific conditions.
The law is called the Act on Temporary Measures to Combat Instrumentalized Migration. It was enacted in July 2024 following a surge in asylum seekers arriving at Finland's border with Russia in 2023. Helsinki said that this wave of migration was orchestrated by Russia, although the Kremlin has denied this accusation. Finland had closed its over 1,300-kilometer-long border with Russia in December 2023, after some 1,000 migrants without visas had shown up on the country's doorstep. The Finnish government is now looking to extend the act, although the length of this extension is yet to be discussed. Some legal experts have pointed out that the act violates human rights obligations that have been written into Finland's constitution.
A report by The Insider claims that Russia's GRU military intelligence paid millions of dollars to militant groups in Afghanistan to target U.S. and allied forces. Now, these alleged payments are said to have occurred in the years leading up to the U.S. withdrawal from the country.
This report is lined with a 2020 one by the New York Times that cited U.S. officials who said that Russia paid bounties to the Taliban to kill coalition troops in Afghanistan. Later on, Washington said it had, to quote, low to moderate confidence in these claims, while Moscow denied the reports. According to an anonymous Afghan intelligence official, the GRU Taliban program paid an average of $200,000 per U.S. or coalition soldier that was killed. Smaller payments were given out for killing Afghan soldiers. Moscow's total payout to the Taliban during the entire operation was allegedly some $30 million. Since Washington's chaotic and criticized withdrawal from Afghanistan in 2021, Russia has been developing its partnership with the Taliban. Despite this, Moscow still considers the group a banned terrorist organization.
And that's all on this episode of Eastern Express. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.